Welcome. Last time we talked about passages of praise and parent-son statements. Let us get right into the next topic. Verse January 2nd, 17, with the completion of the ritual action for the sake of the fruit, a specific fruit would arise for those agents, proportionate to the action, as in ordinary life. To clarify, working out your biceps improves the biceps, the agent by which the biceps are worked out. Meditation on the mind would improve the concentration of the mind. The agent is the mind by which it is strengthened. Rather, it should be an injunction, a directive for action, because it reveals something new, for a mere descriptive statement is entirely meaningless. Because of the priority of the injunction, it is not simply as in ordinary life. But it has already been stated that these descriptive passages are actually remnants, or extensions, of the injunction. And an injunction is sometimes purposeless, therefore praise is understood in such cases, and because of the generality of that, the same holds in others. Verse January 2nd, 24, a reduction of scope that occurs within the context should not be assumed, for the injunction would be purposeless in that regard. What is scope? The verse which limits ritual to sacrificial rites would limit the entire meaning. In this scope, whatever has been derived, only exists in this scope. Generality is the scopeless. The injunction would be purposeless if the scope was simply assumed. Example: among all sacrifices the chanting of mantras is the greatest. For this very example, it is not understood by the scope of sacrificial rites since that is too small. But the example also is not understood by the scope of all actions since that is too big. Having derived a scope of all sacrifices mentally or physically, you can derive the ranking of mantra chanting in that scope. Now, in the case of an injunction, the assumed scope would also create a difference in the words. Or, it could be a reason on account of it being meaningful and justified. But it is a praise, eulogy, because it is based on the authoritative words of Scripture, and there is no injunction within it. If it is objected that praise is improper when the literal meaning is useless or absurd, we reply that it has a purpose because it serves as an extension of the injunction, just as we see in everyday world speech. Previous example: sacrifice is the greatest act. Now. Verses January 2nd, 31 to January 2nd, 39, because of the meaning of the Scriptures, because of the fixed rule of sentences, because of the text concerning wisdom, because of speaking of things that do not exist, because of the connection of meaning to an insentient entity, because of the contradiction in meaning, because of a statement analogous to the case of one's own Vedic study, because it is not known by any other means, those mantras that contain connections to transient, mortal, things, the literal meanings are entirely useless. Therefore the mantras with direct meanings that do not connect to Brahman are purposeless. The rule of hermeneutics is that no mantra can be purposeless. Therefore all mantras with direct meanings are signal to Brahman. However, the meaning of the sentence is always same. Let us now evaluate our first mantra. Rigveda 1:1:1, I glorify Agni, the high priest of the sacrifice, the divine, the ministrant, who presents the oblation, to the gods, and is the possessor of great wealth. In this case, the mantra would only be indirect. Unless the eternality of Agni is present, the mantra would be taken as purposeless praise. If we were to introduce a new mantra which says, Agni is eternal, then the mantra would have purpose. If we're to find the metaphysical meaning of sacrifice and the metaphysical meaning of oblation, we would be able to gather purpose from them. When you go on to interpret the Vedic scriptures at higher levels, you will need to account for previous verses before making any conclusive decisions. Verse January 2nd, 42, a statement which is repeated is for a secondary purpose. A repeated statement is a statement of exclusion. By repetition it is known what is excluded. A statement of exclusion is a restriction of limitation. If a scripture states, "The flesh of animals whose feet are divided into 5 nails is eatable," that is exclusion. A repeated statement also is a statement of exclusion. For example, Rigveda 10-129-1, there was neither existence nor non-existence, due to the repetition of the word, neither, it emphasizes the negation that exists in the object of the verse, the Supreme Self. Or it can be an explanatory passage. Arthavadadu, some argue this is a statement of exclusion while others argue a statement of explanation. Due to the negation of the earth, universe, beings, sun, moon, stars, light, gods, and worlds, the passage explains this very negation by expressing the negation of totality. The non-explanatory meaning behind this verse would be, there was neither earth, universe, beings, sun, moon, stars, light, gods, and worlds. Verse January 2nd, 44, what is non-contradictory is great. In a ritual command, the non-criticism of an action is because it has the purifying impression. In a designation of the action it is an explanatory passage. There would be no prohibition on account of it being secondary. Now in our toolbox we have the passage of praise, parent-son statements, descriptive passages, scope-limited passages, non-eternal mantra meanings, repeated passages for exclusion and repeated passages for explanation. Because of being secondary, these passages are under the scope of the parent. Because the scope should never be assumed, the parent alone should define it. Let us evaluate this verse from the conclusive teachings of the Vedas. Brahman is not grasped by the eye, nor by speech, nor by the other senses, nor by penance or good works. A man becomes pure through serenity of intellect, thereupon, in meditation, he beholds him who is without parts. Mundaka Upanishad 318. The parent is the scope of Brahman. Since the subject of the Vedas is Brahman, the scope for Brahman is all the Vedic injunctions. Because the passage is a call for action of meditation, it is not a passage of praise. Because the mantra is connected to the immortal, the direct meaning should be taken. Because the mantra repeats not being grasped by the eyes, not being grasped by the senses, not being attained by penance, and likewise, the mantra is a repeated passage and is either a passage of exclusion or passage of explanation. Case 1, Exclusion. If the mantra were a passage of exclusion, it would reject the other austerities and meditation would alone be deemed valid. Case 2, Explanation. If the mantra were a passage of explanation, it would accept the other austerities and the mantra would be deemed as an explanatory passage for meditation. Both cases are constructed under the generality scope, so any further evidence must also be. Now let us crack these cases using our toolbox. One of our tools was that the mantra is direct because it speaks of the eternal. Therefore from this passage it can be interpreted that meditation is alone valid to grasp Brahman among the items listed in the verse. We can reject case 2 with our toolbox or list of axioms. As we look more into the hermeneutics, we will come across more axioms and further improve our analysis. Congratulations, you had done your first argumentative analysis. This is the beginning, now we will move on to harder topics. Thank you for listening. Subscribe if you want to be notified about newer videos.